Hi, good morning, and welcome to Capital Grounds Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Miller. Got my other co-host here, Luis Cortez. This morning, we're bringing you real estate news. We are with SITG Capital, real estate investment firm based out of Texas. Currently, we've got properties in Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. We've got over 11,000 units and growing. This morning, we are happy to have a special guest, Dr. Randy Flowers with RSDS Appraisal. How are you, Randy?
Hi, it's nice to meet you, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. We're looking to talk a little bit about coffee. That's my favorite part of the topic this morning. But then we're going to talk about some of the high-level news in markets going on today. And then we're going to dig into diversity in housing this morning. And, I got to say, I'm excited to have Randy here. Randy and I went to high school together, and thankfully we're able to reconnect a couple of months ago. And and hearing about what Randy does at his firm and his experience, I'm very excited to chat with him today. I think it's going to be a good conversation. But before we dig in, Randy, we do a little bit about coffee we talked about. So what's in your cup this morning?
Yeah, this morning actually it's the good old Starbucks coffee that I have. Just the darkest grounds that you can possibly get. It's not good enough if it's not making your forehead twitch. I try to get it pretty dark and strong. But yeah, that's what I'm drinking.
Nice, nice. Do you have any? You showed me your mug earlier. Can you give us a little information about it?
Yeah, it has a light bulb upside down, and what it reads is liquid inspiration is event inspiration. And a little bit about that is, the value of an idea lies in the using of the idea. Thomas Edison once said that. And I think, to be successful, we have to be solution oriented, and we have to spend our time and energy strategizing, planning, and leading folks in ways of, inspiring, developing, and creating systems that make problems disappear. And really, the only way to do that is to really think through those things. So I start my morning every morning with coffee. I drink 2 to 3 cups that are, I think, 16 ounces. So they're
Ooh,
not they're
nice.
not they're not short. And really trying to be in a creative space. Doing that liquid inspiration and thinking about the company and the profession and what aspects are going great, but where do opportunities lie that we're not thinking about? And really trying to get to a point of an event inspiration or an actual solution-oriented solution that moves us into improving and re-innovating. And that's really how I start my day every day.
Wow, I can't say that I do that every day. That sounds like an excellent, productive, frankly, productive way. But being mindful about the problems and executing on the ideas, that, I'm jealous. That sounds great. That sounds great. I don't know if you've watched any of our previous episodes. I think you mentioned you had, but Luis, what are you drinking this morning?
Today, well, the mug is my Nick Miller inspired 10-ounce Yeti. I found it in OD green. Green's my favorite color, so I had to snag it, man. It was I think it's a new color. And today I actually just have some good old man. Those little tablets for hydration that have a little caffeine in them, and so I'm trying that out today because I'm actually on intermittent fasting. So
Ooh,
I got actually my clock just started here at 11:30 to start eating. But yeah, so that's all I've got. Just some water with a hydration tab and that little caffeine that has little caffeine built into it.
nice, nice. Well, I hope it works out well for
Yeah.
you.
And I was telling y'all before, I was actually inspired because you have one, but also because the perfect ratio to make bourbon drinks in this thing. So
He's got the residual of the bourbon last night in his coffee this morning.
There you
it's
go.
that
That's the
slightly oak flavor. Yeah,
way to kickstart your morning.
that's right.
I'll tell you, I think my favorite go-to blend, it's called Cameron's Breakfast Blend. Cameron's, they come in a little blue bag. You probably see them in the Midwest. They're based out of Minnesota. Breakfast Blend is dependable. It's got great fruity flavors. It's medium roast. And I tell you, it's an excellent go-to because you know what to expect. And if depending on how you make it, even if you make it, using a Keurig or something, really fast, you're still going to get a great cup of coffee to go with it. So check it out, Cameron's Breakfast Blend. It's in the blue bag. They've got them, I think, most places. I've seen them obviously in Kansas here in the Midwest. I've seen them in Colorado, so I think you can get them just about anywhere.
Yeah.
But I've got my classic Yellowstone mug. Told the story on that before. But anyway, gentlemen, we've seen a lot of interesting news come out here within the last handful of days. Hang on here. So existing home sales dropped by 3.3% in June, which, to nobody's surprise, but when you tie that into the recent projections, it sounds like the calculation is that housing costs have been about 70% of the increase in inflation, which, given everything that's going on, certainly when you look through the lens of our industries, that seems completely reasonable. So I think as we continue to see sales drop or slow down, maybe we'll start to see some changes in the pricing. And in a number of areas, we've seen home prices start to stagnate. You're not, and by that I mean you're not seeing a bunch of bids well over asking, right? Things are slowly starting to slow down. So we'll see how that affects rates over the next 12 to 18 months. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of change, but
Yeah, I think they're forecasting another rate hike here. I think this month potentially. Maybe is that this week? I can't remember if it's this week or next week. But most likely, gonna for sure see, I think, one more that probably then, and I'm hearing in the industry at least another one probably in December. And then we'll see where that goes. It's kind of crazy. You got to break the system down to fix inflation. You got to make people's lives hard, and we just saw another big round of layoffs at Rocket Mortgage this week, and layoffs continue in the industry, and that's really unfortunate because that's people's lives that we're talking about, and we always got to keep that lens in mind.
Yeah, and my point of view is this whole process of decision making is ass backwards. It didn't have to get to this point, and this is as the Fed will say, a bazooka, right? To be able to come out and put a hole so that you can kind of suck the air out, and versus understanding that printing money and giving a bunch of money away for free is not always the best solution. In fact, it very rarely is. The free market system needs to be a free market for it to operate, but constant intervention can create these type of things. Now, short-term intervention, but this is obviously way further in short term. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I personally believe we're kind of getting to that point where you're going to really cripple the economy if interest rates get any higher, just because one, you have we're in a good place to be, right, in the multifamily space, because it's going to shift, it's already shifting people, right, from being able to buy a house or wanting to buy a house, even because of where the rates are, to going back to renting and predominantly in multifamily. But you're also seeing car lots, right? You're seeing businesses not be able to move inventory or, anything that people would normally use credit for, which is not always right. Keeping people from getting in debt is part of the solution, but it's also part of the problem from the standpoint of people being able to go out and use dollars and especially with low interest rates to be able to manage their cash flow. So long term, we have to they have to find something better than just raising interest rates. We've got to be able to start having some discipline of not just pumping money into the system, because those dollars end up just creating more issues.
Yeah, and next year's an election year, so how's that going to play into it? And are we going to drive rates up and then bring them down just in time for the election? And what agendas are hidden in some of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, for me personally, I think my biggest stick with what we've seen with interest rates is I feel like I wish that we would have, and I'm saying we, right, as a whole. I think a lot of people could see this coming, but
Yeah.
I wish that the Fed would have taken seriously a bit more the lag and what they were doing to the actual effects, inflationary effects, because I think they could have started a lot sooner
Yeah.
and maybe slowed the roll a little bit. But certainly, Randy, you and I talked last time, and I've talked with Fred Owens. We've had on here. He's a mortgage lender about the how wild it is that the mortgage industry is still such a boom and bust cycle, and you have people that get laid off in the low years and then have explosive growth in other years, and it just seems like it's a standard that needs to change because you can't. I feel like we're in modern times. We can do better, we can do better than just a boom and bust cycle. But um, yeah, we'll see. We'll see, especially with the election year, Randy. That's a great point. I'll be surprised to see all the changes that come about. But
Yeah.
Randy, if you could, introduced you a little bit earlier, but would love to hear and share with our viewers your background, where you've been. I think you've got a great story. So please tell us about Dr. Randy Flowers.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Nick, that we're on here today because, we did go to high school together, but together too, going back to a young age. So
That's right.
yeah, I mean, we go back to, I don't even know how old you were when you started, probably 5 years old, 6 years old. So
I
we
totally forgot about that.
we go all the way back to Medora, Kansas, in wrestling, which Medora is not even an established incorporated city. That's how tiny it is. But originally from Buhler, Kansas in the Midwest, went to Fort Hays State University in Western Kansas to get my bachelor's, and then ended up going into higher education. So I got my master's at the University of Kansas and my doctorate at Baker University, and was in higher education for 10 years. I was a dean at the end of my tenure in higher education, and was overseeing 12 functions of the university. And it was COVID. It was COVID that really broke me down and made me realize, where's my passion at? So I've been in the industry for 10 years, and it seemed everything I had built in terms of community and growth in the university was 100% ripped away. So over 16 months of COVID, all programs were stripped away. Was responsible for shutting down the university, responsible for reintroducing the university, responsible for policing college students on, you can't hold hands with your girlfriend because that's exchanging germs on college campuses. And it was pretty difficult as a professional to see that all the things that you built, all the community you built was just broken down. And now your job was no longer building community, but policing community. And that just really was not the niche I wanted to be in. This is at the same time as, you go through 10 years of budget cuts and you're like, man, how do I keep doing more with less? And so I just felt education was becoming very polarized. At the same time, I had some mentors that I had met 10 years ago. And I just met up with them as friends, just talking how life, chop and shop, and what was I doing, what did I build? And then they were telling me about what they were looking at starting, and that was a company called RSDS, and trying to revitalize the appraisal industry. Right now, 98% of appraisers today are white men, and the majority of them are over 60 years old. So
Oh, wow.
it's actually the least diverse profession in the entire United States, and it is a dying out profession. And so they were telling me about this and how they wanted to bring a younger youth in and educate them and get them licensed and active in the profession. But if they were to do that, also increase diversity. And by diversity, meaning appraisers of color, bringing more women in and bringing military members into the industry. And as they were telling me about what they were working on, I was just thinking, in a way, you're building a university for the appraisal industry. You're building an education system that develops, fosters, and graduates appraisers. And I see a lot of relation on what I do in colleges that I could do here. And they were like, no, Randy, you're way overthinking all of this. All we do is train appraisers and they go become appraisers. And I'm like, nah, there's more here. So I actually looked them in the face and I said, I think I'm going to quit my job and join you guys. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, you've been in higher ed. You were just picked as the National Professional of the Year. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm quitting. Like, we're going to go do this. So I quit my career, joined the company. There was just a few of us in the company at that point. I actually was a trainee. Because how can you go lead something that you know nothing about? So went and did my 200 hours of coursework, was completing appraisals, did about 400 hours of experience. And at that time I said, okay, I'm not good enough to be an appraiser, but I know enough to step back and build an education system that supports this. So I did that, step back, built a 365-day education program that moves somebody from knowing nothing about the appraisal industry to becoming a certified residential appraiser. And through that, have gone to women's colleges, HBCUs, really develop partnerships that increase the diversity and inclusion in the real estate appraisal industry. And now have successfully graduated 40 appraisers, and the company's up to 170 appraisers in 42 cities.
Wow, that's massive growth. And how long has the company been around?
2.5 years.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. You know, I think you hit on a number of interesting points when we talk about what I mean housing in general, right? We can look at a larger scope and talk about inequality in the US as a whole, but specific to our industries, just housing inequality is such a massive piece of the generational wealth gap, you know, and we see on our side, whether that's as financial professionals, you know, giving advice, or on the multifamily real estate side, I mean, sometimes we go to these places and the inequality just stares you in the face, right? Currently, 70 to 75% of white individuals own their own home. And when you compare that to 40 to 45% for Blacks, Hispanics, it's a massive difference. And then you put that through the lens of home ownership being the single largest wealth building tool for the vast majority of people. You know, some of the other problems that we see going on start to make a bit more sense. But how have
Yeah.
you, yeah, from your perspective, how have you been able to find the kind of growth or create the kind of growth that you've made over the last 2.5 years? What do you see as the linchpin or part of the bigger picture?
Well, a lot of those things go back to how the government used to redline districts. I
Sure.
mean, set up neighborhoods uh, for different audiences to be in them, and really through government mandates create those red lines and neighborhoods. Well, from that, appraising then said, okay, if we're going to put a value on a house, then we're going to draw a neighborhood of like-minded homes, and we're going to use those red lines to call it the neighborhood. And through fair housing policies and practices, that's continuing to evolve in a more positive direction, and eliminate that discrimination that just naturally took place. And so how we draw neighborhoods today is not in that same fashion. And so it's two-part. It's one, bringing new appraisers in the industry to have another generation that thinks differently, acts differently, and appraises differently. But the second part is educating the current existing appraisers. So we have mandatory monthly trainings that go on with our appraisers, no matter if they've been in the industry for 30 and 40 years. They go through this. They go through audits with our chief appraiser, where they have to make sure certain language and practices are fair. So we are truly creating an education system, not just for new appraisers, but existing appraisers, to make sure their practices are appropriate.
And you've mentioned in the past, in some of our initial conversations, you've mentioned how if you were a person of color or if you were any non-white individual, basically, you were likely, certainly in the past, likely to have your home listed as or appraised at a lower value. Can you give me more information and share more with me on that?
Well, I mean, through the historically of the redlining of districts, it created neighborhoods where, maybe low SES was in this neighborhood, middle SES is in this neighborhood, high SES is in this neighborhood. And if you're keeping those boundaries as where you're trying to force people into, that doesn't mean that your house with certain complexities isn't like a house in the other neighborhood. So redefining those lines and truly getting comparables that are realistic rather than by a government mandated district. I mean, that's critical to that.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And man, I mean, we see so many we have in the past, and Luis, would love to hear your perspective. When we talk with families, I'll tell you the it's surprising to me how many policies or areas we've run into where, for instance, to be an investor in a number of our projects, you have to be an accredited investor, right? Which means you have to have wealth above $1 million. You have to have income above 200 or 300,000, depending on whether you're a single or joint filer. And the wealth building indicator excludes your primary residence. And so, especially in the advisor seat, when we look at the number of policies where your primary home is excluded from whatever qualification it is, right? And then you look at the number one wealth building tool across the US is your home. It starts to paint a much broader picture of how deep some of these roots of inequality run. Um, Luis, what kind of scenarios did you see? I can speak to my situations personally, but working in the Midwest, I feel like we don't have, or I haven't seen quite the diversity in the cities that I live in. But Luis, would love to hear your experiences in the kind of diversity you worked with in your client base, in your
Yeah,
advisory
sure.
history.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of different angles you can look at it, right? I mean, is it a socioeconomic issue? Is it a cultural issue? Is there flat out racism taking place? It could be, I think, all the above, right? I think there's a blend that we have to take into consideration, right? And there's obviously practices and regulations put into place to, protect classes of people from that discrimination. But it's interesting that we're on this topic because what was going through my mind is actually some of these things that we've been studying in our MBA program. And one of them, with being AI being part of our concentration, um, is some of this AI that's in place. Now it's more on the lending side of things. So I don't know, Randy, how much of it's being used on the appraisal side. But that, and they went back in and, of course it doesn't take into account race or anything like that, but there are other certain parameters. And this even shows you still how AI can be flawed, that a disproportionate amount of minorities were being, they're having their loans not approved. And so it's kind of like, all right, well, what element within the code or what within the parameters was causing that? So, so like I said, you can build something based off of even technology and still see that, all right, there's still something going on. And I think what it is it comes down to perspective, right? I think it comes down to, okay, what are we not considering? I mean, and if you think about it, and I'm not calling anybody out, but let's just say hypothetically, right? If you have a bunch of people coding this thing that are white, right? they're probably coding it through their eyes, right? And they're probably not considering. So that's where, right, diversity comes into play of making sure that you have different, back to thought, thought leadership, right? You have different perspectives coming in to make sure that you're considering as many different angles as you can. I can speak to growing up. I mean, there were definitely, growing up in a small South Texas town, there were definitely, your Hispanic parts of town. We didn't have a whole lot of African Americans in our town, but they were kind of blended in, and the town was predominantly white. I don't like to get a whole lot into the race of things, as I just try to see people for being human beings, right? But I think we have to be conscious of some of these things because they affect obviously our industry. They're obviously this is a pretty hot topic these days. I think we give it too much ammunition, which I think continues to create divisiveness. That's just my opinion. But you have a lot of Black leaders coming out and saying the same thing, right? It's like the reason that it's just gasoline keeps getting thrown on the fire because we keep on making it that way versus figuring out how we're more alike than we are different, right? And even someone as famous as Morgan Freeman has come out and said that, right? But the fact remains is there's if you think just about history, right, and timeline of things, we're only 60 something, almost 70 years from civil rights movement. We're 160-ish years from slavery being abolished. I don't know if there's been enough generations for there to be a correction in socioeconomic conditions. I just don't know. I think that would be a data set that we would have to study and really figure out. But there's obviously I don't think anybody can argue that things are better, that they aren't better now for people of color than they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. You know what I mean? Things are obviously better. But there are still ways to make sure that we give everybody the same fair chance, right? And because that does exist, right? There's the kids that come from quote unquote the wrong side of the tracks that they're behind, right? They're kids of parents who maybe don't have an education, maybe don't have the financial savvy that some of us may grew up with. So I think there's the cognition of being socially and emotionally aware that there are people who need that extra effort and care, but you also have to make sure that they're open to that, because I think you can't take too much of an approach of being too forward with it, and then they're insulted, right? They're like, do you not think I'm smart enough to figure this out? Or so I think it's right. You gotta have to find the right balance of how do you help without insulting? How do you acknowledge without it being divisive? And speaking as a person of color, I've always, I've had to face racism in my life. But in my view, I was very fortunate to have parents that helped me to understand that that's their problem, not my problem, right? That I'm not a victim and they're the ones missing out, not me. So, but not everybody has that. And so I think it's more along the lines of trying to find ways that we can help people work towards that I would call financial literacy, understanding what their options are. And I really think it goes back to education. And sadly, we education is so concerned with, at least it feels like there's been this last like 5 maybe 10 years where there's some very progressive ideas out there that really it's kind of like, all right, where's the value in someone's life long term for those things versus how about we actually teach people real life skills that they can use, like how bank accounts work, how credit works, what is a stock, what is a bond, how do you invest, how do you save, how do you stay out of debt? Unfortunately, that's just not there, definitely not to scale. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I live in Austin, Texas, where it's one of the most socially diverse, ethnically diverse cities probably in the world. So you kind of see even my neighborhood where it's kind of upper end, but you see people of all race and color here.
Yeah, I think you brought up a couple different thoughts there, but one of them was having diversity of thought in the building process, and who's at the table, and are you considering all viewpoints? And it doesn't matter what the profession is, whatever you're talking about, that's critical in today's world. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
it is a diverse world that we're living in so many forms. And I mean, it's not just race, but inclusion and many different things, religion, SES. I mean, all of the different aspects. You've got to be intentional. You've got to be
Mhm.
intentional with the processes. And then you're talking about rebuilding systems. I mean, systems were built for a different generation, and we are moving into a new generation. And so as we do that, we have to look at all the systems, no matter what it is, education, to government reform, and how does that support varying audiences. There's
Mhm.
ways to get into the appraisal industry, and through history, only one of the three have ever been used, still to today.
Yeah.
There's two ways that have never been used. And one of them is, the one that gets used is it's a supervisor model. You have to have a supervisor that you mentor with and complete 1,500 hours of experience. Well, how many people want to go mentor someone else that once they're licensed can go on their own, compete against you, and take your business? No
Mhm.
one wants to do that. So the only way, someone's going to get in is if my father is willing to train me, because no
Sure.
one else's father wants you to train you and have you as a competitor. Well, if it's my father or my family member, they're going to look like me and have the same beliefs as me. And that's what's created that gap. The other two models is one, it's a brand new model, but it's using AI and going through an accredited program that teaches you how to do appraisals, and using computer technology to teach you. But the third model no one talks about is it's always been approved, and it's called a practicum model, but virtually it's an accredited university program
Mm.
that says this has curriculum, this has processes in place to track learning, and they're not going to be able to go be an appraiser if they haven't checked all of these boxes on what they've learned, displayed that learning, and had the experience hours to fully develop that learning,
Mhm.
which is what RSDS is. We're working right now to be the first practicum in the entire country. And that model has been available for 50 plus years. No one's ever done it. So talk about breaking down systems that enable this problem. I mean, that
Mhm.
it goes all the way down to the root. That's just one example, but that's how many of those examples are in our everyday lives of there's actually other ways to get into something, but no one wants to go build it.
Yeah. No, that's great that you bring that up because I actually looked into a real estate appraisal. I don't know, about 5 years ago, I guess. It's just something to kind of maybe do on the side. And I didn't, and yeah, especially here in Texas, you're right about the whole people not wanting to train their
Yeah.
future competitors. It's that's real. But again, it comes down to, okay, how does the industry survive, right? So you kind of have to look at the ethics of it, right? Of like, okay, well, if I don't train this person, then my industry is more than likely not going to be around, or it will get replaced
Yep.
by technology or something. So, and again, I think it's one of those things like, all right, am I operating out of scarcity or am I operating out of abundance? And, I'd rather find somebody who operates out of abundance because, at the end of the day, I'll never be competition,
Yeah.
just a colleague.
I think we had 3,000 people apply last year to be a trainee in the program, and we could only take 80. But one of the assignments we give them during the interview process is we need you to call 10 appraisers and ask them if they'll train you, pay you to do that training, and pay for your coursework while doing that training.
How many have been successful?
And come back and tell me what the results are. And we do that so they realize that scarcity. No one is doing this. If
Yeah.
I give you this chance, do you understand that I'm investing $120,000 in you, and I need you to be 100% dedicated every day to doing this, because no one else is going to do this for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's got to be something to help. I mean, because mentoring is incredibly valuable.
Oh yeah.
The financial service model. I mean, people can't come into the industry without a mentor. I mean, it's just impossible. I mean, to be able to come in and learn everything you need to learn about being a financial advisor in a book format, it takes you years to accumulate that experience, knowledge, and skill set. And it's constantly changing and growing, right? Because regs change, due diligence changes. I mean, it's constantly evolving. So I would say it probably took me, I mean, and this is when this is with having mentors. It probably took me a solid 2, if not 3 years before I felt that I was really competent.
Yeah.
And, and so I'm sorry. It's just that I could go down a rabbit hole in this thing, but it's interesting that you bring up how y'all have created basically a school platform, right? An actual, almost like a real estate school, right? So now it's like you've got appraisal school, which I think is fabulous. I think that's going to be a great, especially having gone down and found that roadblock, and it's like, okay, that's really cool, and I think it's going to be very successful. Hey, Nick, you're on mute. Barely.
Oh.
Great.
I'll have to cut this part out.
Edit time. No, that's great, Randy. I shoot, man. I might come sign up just so I can have that on my belt.
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually in Austin.
Yeah, when I did my real estate license, that was something I was really good at running CMAs, and I was hearing how like we have such a shortage of appraisers, and I was thinking, you know what, I don't like doing this retail realtor thing. Like I hate being that available.
Yeah,
yeah. I was like, but I like running and crunching numbers, So
yeah,
and so I was thinking, okay, maybe I could shift that, because I was thinking about kind of getting out of the financial advisor role, and then I found it just wrangled me back in until I finally got to the point. I said, deuces, I'm out. Like,
Can you guys hear me better now?
Yeah, we
yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, but
No worries,
that's why we had it right.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Let's.
You want to wrap up?
Yeah, we can. Randy, I don't know how much time you have dedicated, but yeah, we've got a few more minutes here on my calendar.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, we'll just jump right back in. We'll go 3, 2, 1. Yeah, you guys covered a number of different topics there, but with some of the problems that we've discussed, I view, so we'll take inequality or inequity as a whole, right? I view it as a weed in the garden, and you have to go through and you have to get all of the roots. And in so many systems we see, Luis, when you were talking about AI building or producing, I'm not going to say producing results that were not representative of the population as a whole, biased results. With some of these systems, you have to go with a fine-tooth comb and look at everything that we've built. And I say we being, the straight white male, everything that we've built from the beginning of the country, I feel like, and you have to go through with a fine-tooth comb and really review and figure out, okay, where are these biases that we've built into it, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because there are so many of those that we still have yet to uncover and correct, And it's interesting to me to hear the impact that it's had in the appraisal industry. It's just one more thread in some of these problems. And they're all interconnected, unfortunately. But, Randy, when you look at the industry as a whole, you mentioned that you've got a vast number of, what I think you said 98% are white males over the age of 65. Is that right? Was that
Over 60? Yeah.
over 60? That's insane. So over the next 10 and 20 years, what kind of turnover do you guys expect to see?
Well, there already is a ton. I mean, there's a gap that's widening actually year over year over year in terms of appraisers that are available to complete the appraisals. And so that gap it's widened. I think it's 3 to 5% each year over year, for the
Wow.
last, I think, 3 or 5 years. And it's continuing. And so that's where, as a system in the appraisal space, we've got to look at how to do things different. And just to be quite frank, there's a lot of people that are waving the diversity flag. This isn't just in real estate. This is in most professions. There's some people that are throwing money at it, because if I give $1 million, that means I care about diversity. And then there's some people that are saying, now, what are you doing with that $1 million? And what is that $1 million going towards? And that's the hard work. It's the actual generating results that's hard. Getting the money isn't hard. People want to look great, and there's a lot of money in the mortgage space, to be just frank. And so to write $1 million check doesn't tell me you're trying to fix it. That may be a part of trying to fix it, but what is that money going towards, and how is that systematically, making a difference? Where that's where I feel RSDS is. I mean, we are truly going and recruiting it. We are paying for everything. We are educating them. We're setting them up for success. They're graduating. So we're not just getting them into it, but making sure that it's solution oriented, that they are graduating, and then getting them back connected. My biggest concern is that there's a lot of people waving the diversity flag, but that's just by throwing money at fake programs. I come back to those people and say, well, how are you feeding volume to people that are maybe systemically been kept out of the system for the last year? And they're like, we don't do that. So right now, volume is down in the appraisal industry. Would you be willing to enroll diverse appraisers on your panel so we can go ahead and get going? No, we're not enrolling anybody at this time. Okay, so you're systemically continuing with the 60-year-old white male that has told you they're going to retire, and you're not willing to set some volume aside to maybe try to revitalize this. And this is the same people writing the checks. The same people writing the check don't want to give them the work on the back end once they are graduated. And so you still have your systems in place that are keeping people out. And so a big part of my day is to figure out where the diversity flags are being waved and start trying to make them realize, because a lot of it's unintentional. That's what you have to understand. A lot of this is unintentional. They're uneducated, and getting them to realize the systemic barriers that they are actually enabling by not doing business differently.
I think
we see virtue signaling across the board, right? Across the markets, industries, and so much virtue signaling is either for a tax write-off or the marketing, the publicity. And thankfully, I feel like our society is starting to push back on that a little bit. But man, when you and I first talked and you told me more about RSDS, I love that you guys walk the walk. You walk the walk much more than you talk the talk. And if anything, I feel like, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was because I feel like more people need to know that you walk the walk. We'll do the talking for you, right? You guys continue walking the walk.
Yeah, I think as people continue to want to, try to keep us out, we just say, all right, we'll keep moving forward. Then, our company is operating at, 90% capacity. There's a lot of people that don't even have work right now. So we're really fortunate for the people that support our program, but that doesn't mean that there's also glaring gaps on other people that, we want to have support us.
Sure. And, Luis, I can't speak for you, but one of the reasons that I personally find conviction and value in multifamily real estate is because everybody needs a home. Everybody needs a roof over their head. I believe they do anyway. And, our population isn't slowing down. It's not shrinking, right? We're not seeing a reduction in the number of people in the US. And certainly in the cities that we operate, they continue to grow, right? There's a chronic lack of housing in these areas. And that's part of what's driven prices up, right? Driven home prices up, which then drives rental prices up because a lack of supply. I mean, it's basic economics, right?
Yeah.
And I don't see, it's not like the appraisal industry is going to go anywhere, Certainly we have highs and lows, but if you have a reduction in the supply of appraisers, the demand certainly isn't going to be there. I think it's in everybody's best interest to continue solving the problem you guys are working to fix so hard.
Thanks.
Well, I appreciate you being on today. I know we've covered a number of topics, gone all over the board, but really appreciate your time, Randy and Luis. Thanks for being here. Glad we're having you on. You gentlemen have any other thoughts or questions, anything we can iron out before we wrap up today's conversation?
No, I'm just really thankful for this conversation, and I think it's dialogue that has to continue, and I look forward to continuing seeing where all of us go.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah, been good. Good talk.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I wish you the best in the rest of your day. And Randy, look forward to talking to you in the near future. Luis, we'll keep plugging away. But if you are a viewer, listener that hasn't checked out our website, check it out, sitgcapital.com. I'll include links to RSDS. Certainly check out their website if you've got needs if you've got an appraiser need. If there's somebody you know that might need an appraiser, if you work in the industry, if you're in real estate in general, check out their website, reach out, connect with them. They're in, what was it, Randy? How many? 40 some cities?
42 cities now.
42 cities and growing. That's 42 cities in 2.5 years. Massive growth. They're operating and working to continue growing. So reach out to them, connect. I haven't met the other members of their firm, but I got to tell you, Randy's a great guy. Wouldn't have him on if he wasn't. And I think he'll take care of you. So check us out as well, sitgcapital.com, and we'll look to talk to you again next week. Thanks, gentlemen. Take care.
See ya.
See ya.